Tonight, I bring you a chilling story, one that found its way to me from a listener named Sarah, who lives in the heart of Austin, Texas. She felt compelled to share her harrowing experience, a tale that will surely linger in your thoughts long after it ends. How did the doctor's appointment go? What did they say? The words, spoken by her mother-in-law, Helen, sliced through the quiet evening air the very instant Sarah and her husband, Michael, stepped across the threshold. Helen's tone was deceptively light, a silken veil over a question that landed with the force of a granite stone, shattering the fragile peace of their return. A silent, panicked glance shot between Michael and Sarah. A pact had been made, a whispered agreement in the car. They wouldn't breathe a word to his mother about the fertility clinic. How could she possibly know? As if plucking the thought directly from their minds, Helen let out a short, derisive scoff, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. Did you two honestly think I don't know what transpires under my own roof? It's painfully obvious the problem doesn't lie with my son. The men in this family are pillars of strength and vitality. We've never had an issue. The insinuation hung in the air, a poisoned arrow aimed with pinpoint accuracy, its tip finding its mark deep in Sarah's heart. A familiar, bitter tide of resentment washed over Sarah. It seemed that every hardship, every shadow that fell upon their lives, was somehow contorted until it was cast as her failing. But no subject was more raw, more agonizing than the gaping absence of children. Helen's attacks were relentless, a daily barrage of cutting remarks. Sarah could still hear them echoing in her mind. That girl was probably reckless in her youth, and now we are all forced to pay the price. Or the one that stung the most. It was a dark day for this family when we allowed that kind of woman to marry our son. Children, they believed, were a sacred gift, a blessing from a higher power. And so the couple had chosen to let fate guide them, to allow nature to take its course. But more than 3 years had slipped through their fingers like sand, leaving them with empty arms and a house that remained stubbornly, achingly quiet. Helen's patience, a threadbare commodity to begin with, had snapped. She had cornered Michael on numerous occasions, her voice a venomous hiss, urging him to cast Sarah aside and find a new wife. Someone whole, someone who could finally give her the grandchild she so desperately craved. And each time, Michael had stood as a shield for his wife, his words a desperate plea for his mother's understanding. Mom, please, don't be like this. Michael's voice was frayed at the edges, stretched taut with exhaustion. We just had a routine health checkup. The results were perfectly normal for both of us. This isn't anyone's fault. The doctor said we just need to relax. Stay positive, and it will happen when it's meant to happen. But Helen was a fortress, impervious to reason. Normal. How can you stand there and say it's normal? She shot back, her voice climbing in pitch. If everything were so wonderfully normal, where is the baby? Her gaze, sharp and venomous, swiveled to Sarah. Or perhaps she paid someone off to forge the results. Mom. That's enough. Michael's voice cracked like a whip, his face a mask of frustration. For God's sake, my wife is a doctor. And so what? Helen retorted, her chin jutting out in defiance. You may be a good, knave man, son, but the world is not filled with people like you. Don't let her pretty face fool you. I had a bad feeling about her from the very beginning. Helen's words fell like a relentless, punishing drumbeat, each one a fresh accusation aimed squarely at her daughter-in-law. It is said that even the heavens hold their breath during a meal, a moment of sacred quiet, yet Helen harbored no such reverence. She spoke with a brutal freedom, poisoning the already suffocating atmosphere. The food in Sarah's mouth turned to ash, each bite a torturous effort to swallow. She remained a statue of silence. knowing that any word she uttered would be gasoline on an already raging fire, only escalating her mother-in-law's vicious tirade. "Don't worry, Mom," Sarah finally spoke, her voice a small island of calm in the turbulent sea of the room, belying the storm raging within her. "We are both in perfect health. I possess neither the vast network of connections nor the disposable income required to falsify medical records. But if your doubts persist, I am more than willing to accompany you to any hospital or clinic of your choosing, to undergo the tests all over again." Her offer seemed to mollify Helen, but only slightly. The older woman still grumbled, "You're certainly good with words. Don't think for a second I wouldn't take you up on that. Can we just stop?" Michael slammed his bowl onto the table, the sharp clatter echoing the shattering of his composure. "Can we not have a single, peaceful meal in this house?" A heavy, oppressive silence descended upon the table. Not another word was spoken. In the beginning, Helen's criticisms were whispers in the shadows, spoken only when Michael was safely out of earshot. But as time wore on, her audacity grew, her insults becoming bolder, flung carelessly in his presence. Michael was a man stretched to his breaking point, trapped in the agonizing space between the two most important women in his life. But it was Sarah who bore the deepest wounds. For every ounce of Helen's longing for a grandchild, Sarah's own desire for a child burned with a tenfold intensity. Family gatherings became a special kind of hell. The moment the extended family assembled, Sarah felt an overwhelming urge to simply vanish, to dissolve into the air and escape the symphony of pitying glances and cruel, hushed whispers that followed her from room to room. She knew the tales they spun about women like her, women who couldn't conceive, their marriages marked as doomed, destined to crumble. A child, they believed, was the living, breathing embodiment of a couple's love, the sacred bond that held two souls together. Now that the diagnosis had confirmed their health, all she craved was a sanctuary of peace, a supportive embrace. Not this ceaseless, soul-crushing torment. She held on to the belief like a prayer. A baby would come to them. Someday soon, more than once, she had offered Michael a divorce, her heart heavy with the terrifying possibility that the fault was hers, that his love for her wasn't strong enough to weather this tempest. But his response was always a steadfast anchor in the storm. He loathed the archaic notion that a man required a son to carry on the family name. He yearned for a child, a son or a daughter. It made no difference. What he refused to do was add another ounce of pressure onto the shoulders of the woman he adored. The house possessed a washing machine, but it sat mostly silent, a monument to Helen's frugality. She fretted endlessly about the water and electricity bills. And so, every night, Sarah washed their clothes by hand. It was a ritual she performed immediately after the dinner dishes were done, for as she left it until morning, the relentless clock would offer no quarter. In the pale morning light, she would hang the damp laundry to dry, then navigate the bustling market, and finally, prepare breakfast for the entire family before rushing off to her own demanding job. That night, Sarah perched on the edge of the bed, one hand kneading the stiff, etching muscles of her neck. The long minutes spent bent over the laundry basin had left their mark. Michael set aside the book he was reading and moved to her side, his strong, warm hands beginning to gently work the knots from her shoulders. She turned her head, a soft smile gracing her lips, but then her eyes darted nervously toward the door. If Helen were to see this simple act of affection, she would undoubtedly conjure a storm. "That's enough," she whispered after a moment, gently lifting his hands from her shoulders. "You must be exhausted too, after such a long day. Let's just read for a bit to help us sleep." Michael leaned in close, his breath warm as he whispered something in her ear. Sarah stiffened, a playful blush rising on her cheeks as she pushed him away. Her eyes flicking toward the door again, understanding dawned in his eyes, and Michael rose to close it as he turned back. The silence was pierced by the sharp, intrusive ringing of his phone. Who could possibly be calling at this hour? He muttered, his brow furrowed as he stared at the unfamiliar number glowing on the screen. He hesitated, a strange, cold unease slithering through him. Who was this person? And what could they possibly want from him in the dead of night? Who is it? Annie? Sarah asked, her voice laced with curiosity as she noted his hesitation. Why don't you answer? Michael's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he turned his back to her, shielding the screen, and finally answered the call. Hello. A voice, seductive and sweet as honey, flowed through the receiver, a venomous nectar. Hello. Stranger, I managed to get your new number. Let me just save it. It was Jessica. His frown deepened, and he lowered the phone, checking the number again as if in disbelief. It was undeniably his. What are you talking about? You have the right number. What do you want? Is your wife there with you? She purred, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Fine, I'll cut to the chase. But don't you dare hang up on me. I have some news for you. Good news. Impregnant. Surprised. No, if you don't come to see me, right this instant, I will march myself down to that hospital where you work and make absolutely certain that everyone in your precious department knows all about us. The words struck Michael with the force of a physical blow. For several heartbeats, he was paralyzed, his mind a vortex of chaos. A turbulent storm of emotions swirled within him, a flicker of joy, a tidal wave of fear. Stark disbelief, and a guilt so profound it threatened to suffocate him. After all these barren years of waiting, of yearning, he was finally going to be a father, but this child, his firstborn, was the fruit of a terrible, drunken mistake, a ghost from a night he wished he could erase. The line had gone dead, but Michael remained frozen, a statue of a man with a phone still pressed to his ear. What is it? Michael. What's wrong? Sarah's voice was a pinprick, bursting the bubble of his chaotic thoughts. Jessica's final thread echoed in his mind, a cage snapping shut around him. She had him trapped. If this secret escaped, his carefully constructed world would crumble to dust. And Sarah, the thought of her finding out, of the pain it would inflict, was more than he could bear. It's an emergency at the hospital. He stammered, his hands fumbling as he hastily pulled on his clothes. I have to go. You go to sleep, okay? Don't wait up for me. Without another word, he bolted from the room, his footsteps thudding down the stairs before the front door slammed shut behind him. Try to be back soon. Sarah called into the sudden emptiness. The commotion had woken Helen, who emerged from her room, her face a mask of sleepy irritation, seeing Sarah standing alone. She demanded, Where is Michael going in such a hurry? I'm not sure. Sarah replied, a bewildered shake of her head. He said there was an emergency at work. A call came, and he just rushed out, as his wife. You should know these things. Helen grumbled, her voice sharp with disapproval. You need to pay more attention to where he is and what he's doing. Sarah knew that any attempt at explanation would be a futile effort against the wall of her mother-in-law's prejudice. So she simply held her tongue. Helen shot her a withering glare before turning on her heel and closing her own door with a decisive click. Sarah let out a long, weary sigh and returned to their empty room. It wasn't unheard of for Michael to be summoned for emergencies, even in the dead of night. But something about tonight felt jarringly different. He had seemed so agitated, so haunted. A vague, creeping sense of unease settled over her, a feeling that had begun to coil in her stomach the very moment he answered that mysterious phone call. She had no idea who was on the other end of the line, or what words they had spoken to send her husband fleeing into the darkness in such a state of panic. When we have children, Sarah had once mused, her head resting on his shoulder, I bet a boy would look just like you, and a girl would be my little twin. Don't you think? The memory of her innocent words echoed in Michael's mind as he jolted awake. It was only a dream. But her voice had been as clear, as if she were whispering in his ear. The space beside him in the bed was empty, the sheets cold to the touch. Sarah was an early riser, always up before the sun to tend to the house. He hadn't worked the previous night, but he had crept home so late that the morning sun was already high in the sky, well past 7 o'clock. On the nightstand rested a note, penned in Sarah's neat, delicate script. Michael picked it up. I left breakfast for you in the fridge. If it gets cold, just heat it up before you eat. Love you. Beside the words, she had drawn a small, perfect heart and a cheerful smiley face. He read the note again and again, the simple words a dagger in his conscience. He let out a long, shuddering sigh, pressing the heels of his hands against his forehead. I'm sorry, he whispered to the silent room. The words felt hollow, meaningless. Sarah wasn't there to hear his pathetic apology. Our child will look like you, his mind replayed, but it won't look like her. The mother of his child was not the woman he loved, not the woman with whom he had woven the tapestry of his life. It was someone else. He slammed a fist into the mattress, a futile gesture of frustration. What a despicable creature he had become. He couldn't harbor this secret forever. But the thought of telling her, of watching her world shatter because of him, was a terror he couldn't face. And if he did confess, what would become of them? Would this be the end of their marriage? A life without her was an abyss he couldn't fathom. But then his mother's face swam into his vision. Her desperate, pleading eyes, her all-consuming desire for a grandchild. He dragged his leaden body out of bed and down the stairs. The house was an empty shell. Sarah had already departed for work, and his mother was likely visiting a neighbor. He was alone with his churning thoughts and the breakfast Sarah had so lovingly prepared. The food was cold now. He placed it in the microwave, but as he sat at the table, lost in his guilt, the acrid smell of something burning filled the air. He had forgotten it. It didn't matter. He had no appetite anyway. At work that day, the office was a hive of buzzing gossip. The department head had just been unceremoniously fired. The sordid details were on everyone's lips. He and his wife had been married for over a decade, with what everyone assumed was a perfect family, a boy and a girl. People were always remarking on what a beautiful family they were, how his wife remained so stunning after all these years. Then, like a bolt from the blue, his mistress had appeared on their doorstep. 2 young children in tow. I just don't get it, one of Sarah's coworkers mused, shaking her head in disbelief. He had a beautiful wife, wonderful kids. Why would he go looking for trouble? It's the same old story. Another replied with a cynical laugh. Guess he got tired of steak and craved a cheap burger. Once a cheater, always a cheater. It's in there now. And 2 kids. Can you even imagine? He must have been at it for a long while. At least she only brought the children. Imagine if Shed brought home some disease to give to his wife and family. Now that would be a true nightmare. In their entire department, Sarah's husband was held up as the gold standard. He didn't gamble, didn't drink or smoke, and he openly doted on his wife. He'll be such a great father someday, a colleague remarked wistfully. Another woman, her fingers flying across her keyboard, chimed in without looking up. You'd better hurry up and have a baby to tie him down before some other woman snatches him away. Oh, we're definitely planning on it this year. Sarah replied, a brittle smile plastered on her face. It wasn't something you could simply will into existence. The normal test results had soothed some of her anxieties, but a seed of doubt remained when people asked. It was simply easier to give them the answer they expected. She couldn't bear the thought of her family's private struggles becoming the next juicy piece of office gossip. That evening, when Sarah arrived home from work, she began the familiar ritual of preparing dinner. Helen was usually at home, sometimes visiting neighbors. But since Sarah had taken over cooking duties, her mother-in-law rarely graced the kitchen with her presence. She would often boast to her friends, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction, "When your son gets married, you should finally be able to rest. You bring a daughter-in-law into the house to serve you, not the other way around." Some would nod in agreement, but others would offer a gentle pushback. They work all day too. You know, they are tired. What's the harm in helping out by cooking a meal? I'm home all day. I get bored. It gives me something to do. You're too soft on her, Helen would retort dismissively. You spoil her like that, and one day she'll be walking all over you. My daughter-in-law does everything. I don't have to lift a finger. It's wonderful. So it was with a jolt of surprise that Sarah saw a pressure cooker simmering on the counter next to the rice cooker she walked in. She nearly burned her hand on its hot surface. She couldn't believe Helen had actually cooked, especially something as elaborate as a rich pork stew. Are we having guests? She wondered. No one had mentioned anything. She was about to head upstairs to ask when she saw Helen descending the staircase. Are we having company tonight, Mom? I cooked for us. Helen replied. And then, in a shift so abrupt it was dizzying, her entire demeanor changed. She became warm, almost friendly, taking Sarah's hand in her own and leading her to the dining table. The sudden transformation sent a jolt of anxiety through Sarah's heart. It was so profoundly out of character. What is it, Mom? She asked, her voice tentative. Helen's face was a strange canvas of excitement and mystery. The other night, I had a dream. It was a sign. I dreamed that our family is going to receive some wonderful news very soon. In a few days, I want you to take another pregnancy test. I have a powerful feeling that you're pregnant. So that was it. A dream. A bitter laugh almost escaped Sarah's lips. It was staggering how a simple dream could become such a potent wellspring of hope for her mother-in-law. She didn't have the heart to disappoint her, and a small, hopeful part of her, a part she thought had long since withered, wished with all its might that it could be true. Okay, Mom, she said softly. Make sure you check carefully. Helen instructed, her eyes gleaming. A dream like that is a very strong omen. No, dinner is all prepared. You go take a shower, and we'll eat as soon as Michael gets home. Okay, I will. Sarah had never been one for superstitions, but as she walked up the stairs, a tiny, fragile flicker of hope ignited within her. She entered her room feeling lighter, happier than she had in a very long time. She had no way of knowing that this newfound joy was a delicate soap bubble, destined to be painfully, irrevocably burst. There was good news on the horizon. Yes, but it wasn't for her. Why are you so late tonight? I had to take care of a few things at the hospital, Mom. Michael replied. The truth was, he had left work early to buy some nutritious food for Jessica before making his way home. A sharp pang of guilt pierced him. He was lying to his mother, betraying his wife, but he felt snared in a trap of his own making. He couldn't abandon his child. His mistake had been born from a single night of weakness, a moment of profound misjudgment that had spiraled into this waking nightmare. Jessica had been drawn to his handsome looks and professional standing from the moment they met. She knew he was a married man, but that had been no deterrent. She was a predator, and she had pursued him with a relentless, single-minded focus. The knowledge of his and Sarah's struggles to conceive had provided her with the perfect opening, a wedge to drive into the heart of his life. His marriage. After dinner, as she always did, Sarah washed the dishes and prepared to tackle the laundry. But because of her dream, Helen was in a remarkably better mood. She actually instructed Sarah to use the washing machine. Afterwards, to Sarah's astonishment, the two of them even sat and watched television together, discussing the characters on the screen. It was a rare, precious moment of peace, of something approaching harmony between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Sarah had grown so accustomed to Helen's perpetually scowling face and sharp-tongued insults that this sudden thaw was a welcome, if unsettling, relief. She found herself wishing, with a painful H, that it could have always been this way. The atmosphere in the house was tranquil, but Michael was oblivious. His mind was consumed by a much larger, more terrifying problem. He lay on the bed, his hands folded behind his head. When Jessica's name flashed across his phone screen, he let out a weary sigh and answered, "Weisel." She cooed, "Don't forget to bring me breakfast tomorrow, for me and for the baby." "I know," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Come over now." She demanded, "I'm hungry." Suddenly, the bedroom door swung open and Sarah walked in. Michael jabbed at the screen, quickly ending the call. "Who was that?" she asked. "Oh, just a colleague from work," he lied, the words slipping out with a practiced smoothness. "He wanted me to switch shifts with him." As he spoke, his thumbs flew across the screen, typing a message to Jessica. Can't come tonight. If you're hungry, order some delivery. Don't go to bed hungry." The next day, Jessica sat at a small table in a chick cave, waiting. It was a beautiful, serene spot, with a miniature rock garden and the gentle, meditative sound of a trickling waterfall. Koi fish, like living jewels, swam lazily in a small pond. She had been waiting for over 10 minutes, and her friend was still nowhere in sight. "I am," a voice called out. It was Emily. She spotted Jessica and glided over, sitting down and ordering an orange juice from the waitress. "Sorry I'm late. You've been hiding from me. Where have you been?" Emily slid off her sunglasses and gave Jessica a conspiratorial wink. "You know I was on that business trip with me, Peterson," Jessica said with a self-satisfied smirk. "We decided to turn it into a little vacation." Emily's eyes conducted a thorough scan of Jessica, from her expensive shoes to her perfectly coiffed hair, lingering for a moment on her new designer handbag. "Is it true?" Emily asked, leaning in close. "Is that Dr. Michael really that rich?" Before Jessica could answer, the waitress returned with their drinks, to Emily's surprise. She placed 2 glasses of orange juice on the table. "What's this?" Emily asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Since when did you switch to the healthy stuff? You hate orange juice." Jessica smiled, a triumphant, knowing smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Let's just say a pregnant woman has to watch what she drinks." Emily stared at her, her jaw slack with astonishment. "Pregnant? Are you being serious? As serious as a heart attack?" Jessica confirmed, taking a delicate sip of her juice. "In more than 3 months along." "Whoa!" Emily breathed. "But who's the father?" "It's Michael," Jessica said, the name dropping from her lips with casual ease. "The one who works with your boss." Emily's gaze instinctively dropped to Jessica's stomach. Now that she looked closer, she could discern a slight, gentle curve. She racked her brain, trying to place the name. Then it hit her. "Wait a minute," she said, slamming her hand on the table with such force that the orange juice sloshed over the rim of the glass. "You crazy woman. You scared me. I remember him now. But he's married. His wife is a doctor, a really respectable woman." "So what?" Jessica shrugged, a picture of indifference. "You're mere. Peterson isn't married." and you still haven't managed to get a ring on his finger. Besides, what does she have that I don't? A marriage certificate. That's just a flimsy piece of paper. They don't have any children. On the other hand, she said, patting her belly with a proprietary air, have something far more important right here. This is my ticket in. Like Sikhs like, the two women were cut from the same predatory cloth. They sat there, sharing their triumphs. Their schemes. If either of them possessed even a shred of decency, a whisper of objection to the calculated destruction of a family, their friendship would have withered long ago. You're good, Emily said, a note of genuine admiration in her voice. What's your next move? You'll see, Jessica replied with a mysterious smile. Leaning back in her chair, a meticulously detailed plan was already taking shape in her mind. She silently communicated with the nascent life in her womb. Sweetheart, you have to help Mommy with this plan. Soon, my love, we'll be moving into Daddy's house for good. The evening rush hour was in full. Chaotic swing. The streets were a churning river of cars, a tangled mess of humanity hurrying home after another long day. Jessica stood on the sidewalk as the sun began its slow descent, its golden light bleeding away behind the towering silhouettes of the city. She had taken a taxi to meet Emily, but had refused her friend's offer of a ride home. She had another plan in motion. She sent a text message to Michael, dropping her location. He was already on his way home, but he was forced to turn around, to alter his course to retrieve her. When he arrived, she hopped onto the back of his motorcycle, her arms wrapping tightly around his waist, in the crowded, anonymous street. The intimate gesture made him deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. What if someone he knew, a colleague or a neighbor, saw them? Let go of me, he said, his voice tight with tension. Don't hold on so tight. What did you say? She asked, her voice a picture of innocence as she pretended not to hear. She deliberately squeezed him tighter, pressing the curve of her body against his back. What's wrong? Are you shy? Or can't you concentrate on driving? She teased, her voice a low purr. He let out an exasperated sigh, but he didn't push her away again. He slowed his speed, driving with an almost painful carefulness, with her plastered against him. He remembered her frequent late-night calls, her complaints of hunger, so he asked, "Are you hungry?" She was surprised. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. Was this actual concern? She wasn't really hungry. She had nibbled on snacks at the cafe, but she wasn't about to let an opportunity like this slip through her fingers. Yes, I'm starving. She lied. This was progress. His suffocating sense of responsibility was slowly, surely morphing into genuine care. It was just a matter of time. Her plan was unfolding perfectly. She just had to orchestrate a few more moves. That night, the savory aroma of braised fish filled the kitchen. Suddenly, a violent wave of nausea crashed over Sarah. She clapped a hand over her mouth and fled to the bathroom, where she was violently sick. Helen, who had been observing her daughter-in-law's every move with hawk-like intensity since her dream, immediately followed her, with Michael close on her heels. After a few minutes, Sarah rinsed her mouth and emerged from the bathroom. Michael and Helen were waiting anxiously just outside the door. "What is it? Are you okay? Are you pregnant?" Helen fired off the questions in a rapid, breathless succession. Sarah looked down at the floor, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm not sure, Mom, but I'm a week late." "That's it. It has to be," Helen exclaimed, clapping her hands together in delight. "Thank God. Thank our ancestors. This family will finally have an heir. I'll take you to the clinic tomorrow to get it confirmed," Michael said, the calmest of the three. Sarah couldn't discern if he was trying to manage expectations, scared by their previous disappointments, or if he was simply overwhelmed. With the possibility of 2 babies on the way at the same time, it was a staggering weight to bear. Sarah, however, was lost in a shimmering bubble of pure, unadulterated joy. She was oblivious to her husband's dazed expression. With all the signs pointing in one direction, she was certain she was finally pregnant. After so many days, so many months, so many years of waiting, her baby had finally found its way to her. There was no greater happiness. The cruel whispers, the sleepless nights steeped in worry, the long, empty days of waiting, it was all over. A tiny, precious life was growing inside her, a product of her deep and abiding love for Michael, a symbol of their shared happiness. "What are you standing there like a statue for?" Helen said to Michael, nudging him sharply. "Go get the car keys." "Mom, I can drive myself," Sarah said. Helen rushed off to clear the kitchen of anything with a strong smell that might upset Sarah's delicate stomach. She saw her son standing there, still in a daze, and assumed he was just overwhelmed with happiness. She had no idea about the tempest raging inside him, no idea that he had already created another grandchild for her, one conceived long before the precious baby his wife was now carrying. The sound of Michael's car pulling into the driveway sent Helen scurrying to the door. She had been on pins and needles all morning. Michael had taken Sarah to the hospital for confirmation, and while Helen was practically vibrating with excitement, Michael's heart was a leaden weight in his chest. Sarah had been too excited to sleep the night before. And Michael, lying beside her in the darkness, hadn't slept either, tormented by the ghosts of his own troubled thoughts. Early that morning, Helen had been up at the crack of dawn, bustling around the kitchen preparing a special breakfast for them. Her eagerness to have a grandchild was a palpable force in the house. Based on Sarah's symptoms, she was utterly convinced. Sarah took off her helmet, her face a stark, desolate mask. The radiant joy and effervescent happiness she had felt were gone, replaced by a crushing, soul-deep disappointment. How could something that had felt so real, so tangible, be so fleeting? She had left the house that morning feeling like a flower in full, glorious bloom. But now, just a few short hours later, she felt wilted, broken, and utterly crushed. "How many months along is she?" Helen asked eagerly, only then registering the bleak landscape of Sarah's face. "What happened?" Sarah walked past her in a daze. She had worn flats that day instead of her usual heels, and her footsteps were unnervingly silent on the tiled floor. "I'm not pregnant, Mom," she said, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper, a sound that was swallowed by the sudden, heavy silence. The brilliant smile on Helen's face vanished as if it had been wiped clean. "What do you mean?" But Sarah didn't answer. She continued her silent ascent up the stairs to her room, leaving Michael to face the full force of his mother's impending wrath. "It was just a false pregnancy, Mom," he explained, his voice flat. "The doctor said it sometimes happens." "Lord, why are you doing this to us?" Helen cried out, her voice raw with anguish. "What did I do to deserve a daughter-in-law who can't even carry a child?" Her hope, which had soared so high, shattered like a soap bubble, and she collapsed onto the sofa, her anger and frustration once again a poisoned dart aimed directly at Sarah. Upstairs, Sarah lay on the bed, silent tears streaming down her face, soaking the pillow beneath her cheek. The brief, beautiful moment of happiness had been a cruel illusion, a dream from which she had been brutally, violently awoken. The doctor's clinical words echoed in her ears. "It's called a pseudocesis, or a false pregnancy. Sometimes, when a woman wants a baby so desperately, her body can mimic the symptoms of pregnancy. The hormonal changes can cause all the signs, but there is no baby." It was a knife twisting in her gut. If only she hadn't allowed her hopes to soar. If only she hadn't believed the signs. If only today had been nothing more than a terrible nightmare, and she could wake up to find a tiny, precious life still growing safely inside her. But life offers no do-overs. Why? They were both healthy. Why was this so hard for them? She began to doubt herself again, her mind spiraling down into a dark, lonely place of despair and self-blame. In the small, quiet room, the only sound was the heartbreaking music of her own shattered sobs. Much later, a familiar, warm voice broke the oppressive silence. "Sarah, are you awake? You should get up and eat something. I brought you some soup. You can't stay in bed with an empty stomach." She rubbed her swollen eyes and glanced at the clock. She had cried herself to sleep and slept through the entire afternoon. Her eyelids were puffy and heavy. The comforting, savory aroma of chicken soup filled the room. She hadn't eaten since morning, and a dull ache of hunger had begun to make itself known. She took the bowl from Michael and ate every last spoonful, then lay back down without uttering a single word. "Just rest," he said softly, clearing away the empty bowl. The fact that she wasn't pregnant was, in a twisted, terrible way, a relief for him. It meant that the situation wasn't quite as complicated as it could have been. Sarah had slept all afternoon, but she didn't know that while she slept, he had received a call from Jessica and had taken her out to eat. She had complained of a specific craving and had made him drive her to a restaurant clear across town. "You should just divorce that barren wife of yours and be done with it." Helen's voice, sharp and merciless, drifted up from downstairs. "She's just holding you back. You need to think about your future, about having a family. Mom, can you please not put so much pressure on her?" Michael pleaded, his voice strained. "How do you expect her to get pregnant when you're constantly stressing her out? I don't care about her feelings." Helen retorted, her voice hard as nails. "If she could give me a grandchild, I would accept her, but she can't. So you need to get rid of her and marry someone who can." The sound of a glass shattering echoed through the house. "How many more years are you going to wait? The whole family is watching you, for my sake. Son, please. Leave her. There are plenty of other women in the world. Why are you so attached to her?" Michael stood in silence, his hands clenched into tight, white-knuckled fists. He was a man torn asunder, caught between his duty as a son, his profound love for his wife, and his inescapable responsibility to his unborn child. He let out a long, shaky breath. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll get you a grandchild." "What are you talking about?" Helen asked, her tone laced with suspicion. "Are you planning to adopt? To raise someone else's child? Is that her idea? I'll go up there right now and give her a piece of my mind. The grandchild of this family must be of our own blood. Mom, calm down," Michael said, physically blocking her way as she started for the stairs. "Please, just calm down. This is hard enough as it is. I'm so tired of fighting." Then stop defending her. "Let me go. I told you," he said, his voice unwavering. "I will give you a real grandchild, my own flesh and blood." His words stopped her dead in her tracks. She turned to him, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and a desperate, dawning hope, like a drowning person clinging to a piece of driftwood. "What do you mean by that? Are you finally going to leave her?" "Yes, that's what you have to do. Son, I'm not leaving Sarah," he said, his voice heavy with a wary resignation. "But you will have your grandchild. I promise you that." "What does that mean?" "Explain yourself," she demanded, her mind racing. Did you find a surrogate?" "You'll find out soon enough," he said, gently removing her hand from his arm and heading to the kitchen. Helen stared after him. completely bewildered. She didn't understand the riddle of his words, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wouldn't be satisfied until she held her grandchild in her arms. A few days drifted by. Sarah had time to think. To process the crushing weight of her grief, she knew she had to change her mindset, to release the suffocating grip of pressure and stress. She couldn't allow the sadness to consume her. They were still young. Many couples took years to conceive. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. This time had been a false alarm, a cruel trick of the heart. But next time, she told herself, it would be real. She pushed herself out of bed and headed for the shower. The cool water on her skin felt like a baptism, washing away some of the lingering sadness. After her shower, she went downstairs. Helen was sitting on the sofa, her eyes glued to the television, as Sarah descended the stairs. Her mother-in-law shot her a glare cold enough to freeze water before turning her attention back to the screen. Sarah pretended not to notice. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said quietly. "I was so tired this afternoon. I fell asleep." The only reply was the droning sound of the television. That evening, Jessica called Michael again. He was in his home office. And Sarah, assuming he was downstairs with his mother, went looking for him. When she didn't find him, she asked Helen, "Have you seen Michael?" Helen looked at her as if she were something unpleasant she had stepped in. Her brief period of feigned kindness had vanished without a trace. But remembering her son's cryptic promise, she answered with a reluctant grunt. He had to go out for something. Jessica was now 6 months pregnant, and her baby bump was a prominent, undeniable curve under her maternity dress. She was propped up against the headboard, munching on a piece of fruit, while Michael lay beside her, one hand resting gently on her belly, feeling the faint, fluttering movements of the baby within. "The baby's kicking," she said with a soft, maternal smile. "Say hello to Daddy." "Little one," Michael smiled back. A genuine, unguarded smile. "Hey there. Daddy can't wait to meet you. Be a good boy for Mommy. Okay, soon we'll go shopping and buy you lots of nice things." Watching him talk to their unborn child, a deep, profound sense of satisfaction washed over Jessica. In just a few more months, their baby would be born. It was time for his wife, for his mother, to meet the new addition to the family. Every time she broached the subject, he would find a clever way to change the topic. But she knew that few men possessed the courage to bring home a child born of an affair and introduce them to their family. He might be a coward, but she certainly was not. After finishing up some work, Sarah turned off her computer and stretched, trying to ease the stiffness in her back. "Are you still awake?" she asked Michael, who was already lying in bed. "I was waiting for you," he said. "You don't have to do that. You should get some rest." She turned off the light and climbed into bed, settling into the familiar curve of his embrace. The soft, ethereal moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting a gentle glow on their faces. She turned to face him and saw that his eyes were wide open, staring at her in the darkness. "Why are you still awake?" she asked. "I couldn't sleep. You?" "Me neither. Is something on your mind? You can talk to me about it. We haven't really talked in a while." She snuggled closer, resting her head on the solid warmth of his chest. For years, this had been her sanctuary, the one place in the world where she could truly relax and feel at peace. Just being held in his arms had the power to make all her troubles melt away. But lately, something had shifted. A subtle, yet palpable distance had grown between them, a hairline crack in the foundation of their marriage. It was just a tiny crack, but it was enough to let the cold wind in. Michael ran his fingers through her long, soft hair. Her hair was different from Jessica's, which was always perfectly styled and held in place with a cloud of hairspray. Sarah's hair smelled faintly of grapefruit oil, He looked down at her, nestled in his arms. "It's nothing," he said. "Just a lot of work lately. I'm sorry." "I understand," she replied. "Hey, my friend Emily's wedding is next Sunday. Are you on call? If not, we should go together. Sunday." He repeated, his mind racing. He had already promised Jessica he would take her shopping for baby things that day. "I have a conference that day." He lied. "You should go by yourself." "A conference? Where? You didn't tell me about it." "I guess I forgot with everything that's been going on. It's just for one day, right here in the city. Nothing major. It's late. We should get some sleep. You have work tomorrow." She lifted her head and looked into his eyes, but he quickly averted his gaze. In the dim, intimate light of the bedside lamp and the moon, she couldn't see his expression clearly. Did he still look at her with the same unwavering love and affection as before? He had changed. He was different. He was keeping something from her. Was she being paranoid? Or was it really that obvious? He was coming home late more often, taking on more night shifts. And earlier, before she had gone to bed, she had found a faint, telltale smudge of lipstick on his shirt collar. She was surprised by her own unnerving calmness. Tears welled up in her eyes and soaked into the pillow, one after another, in a silent, heartbreaking procession. She had never felt so alone, so distant from him, even while lying right next to him in their shared bed. A horrifying thought, one that she had relentlessly pushed away and tried to ignore, now forced its way to the surface of her consciousness. He was seeing someone else. He had another woman. The thought repeated itself over and over in her mind. A painful, agonizing mantra. He had even changed the password on his phone. It was no longer her birthday. Or his. She had no idea what it could be. He was the one who had set the password. But someone else now held the key to his heart. She eventually cried herself into a heavy, dreamless sleep the next morning. She had plans to go shopping with Emily to buy a wedding gift. A careful layer of makeup could hide her pale skin and the dark, telltale circles under her eyes, but it couldn't hide the profound sadness that swam in their depths. "What's wrong?" Emily asked, her perceptive gaze taking in her friend's fragile appearance. "Did you have a fight with Michael?" "Nothing like that." Sarah lied. "I just lost a big project at work, so my bonus got cut. I was so looking forward to it." "Honey, I'm so sorry to hear that." "Don't worry. I'll treat you today." Emily spoke in a tone that was half joking, half serious. Sarah hadn't yet begun to voice her suspicions about Michael. She didn't want her personal turmoil to cast a shadow on her friend's happiness. Emily deserved to be happy. The two of them had been through so much to get to this point, and Sarah was genuinely, deeply happy for her. "Don't be silly," Sarah said, managing a weak, watery smile. "I'm not that broke. Let's go pick out a gift." Emily led her to a high-end department store. Sarah stood there, surrounded by a glittering array of beautiful, expensive things, but nothing could capture her attention or lift her heavy spirits. She was lost in the labyrinth of her own thoughts, a million miles away. Ouch! A sharp cry broke through her reverie. In her day, she had bumped into someone, a pregnant woman. "Oh, I'm sorry. Are you okay?" Sarah asked, her heart hammering in her chest. Emily rushed over. "What happened?" "Sarah, are you all right?" The pregnant woman smiled and shook her head. "I'm fine, just a little startled. Could you help me with my bag? With this belly, it's hard for me to bend down." Sarah quickly retrieved the woman's fallen purse and handed it back to her. After the woman had departed, Emily turned to Sarah, her expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "What is wrong with you today? Your head is completely in the clouds. Are you sure you're okay? Maybe I should take you home." "I'm fine." Sarah insisted, "Just a little lightheaded. That's all. It happens sometimes. I done like this. Let me take you home. I'm worried about you." "Really?" "I'm fine. It's probably just low blood pressure. It'll be okay in a minute." Emily guided her to a quieter area with a bench where she could sit and rest. Sarah got home later than Michael that evening. She took some food out of the refrigerator though. Then, after a moment's hesitation, put most of it back, leaving just enough to cook a small, simple meal for Helen. The late afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, painting the room in hues of gold and orange. Across the street, in the park, a group of elderly women were engaged in their daily exercises, their movements slow and graceful, synchronized to the soft, gentle music that drifted on the air. Children played on the swings and slides, their joyous laughter filling the air as their mothers and grandmothers tried to coax them into eating their dinner. Helen was there too, playing with a neighbor's grandchild. The little boy was giggling, clearly delighted by the attention. It would be so wonderful if we had a child of our own, Sarah thought with a familiar pang of longing. The world outside was bustling with life, but inside her home, it was quiet and achingly lonely. She held her hand up to the window, the playful sunbeams dancing through her fingers. Then she lowered her hand, letting the warm light wash over her, a stark, painful contrast to the cold emptiness in her heart. She had just stepped out of the shower, a towel wrapped around her wet hair, when Michael came into the room. "Why are you home so late?" he asked as he dried his own hair. "I went out for a dessert with some colleagues after work," she replied. Dessert was supposed to be sweet, a comforting treat, but the one she had consumed that afternoon had left a bitter, unpleasant taste in her mouth. She stood by the window, watering her small collection of houseplants. Michael came and stood beside her, watching her gentle movements. "Hey," he said softly, "let's go out for dinner tonight. Just the two of us. I thought you said you had to work late," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. He hadn't heard her clearly. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable, and repeated, "I said, let's go out for dinner tonight." It had been a long time since they had done that. They used to go out for dinner, take long, aimless drives, or go to the movies. But it had been at least 6 months since their last date night, since Jessica had gotten pregnant. He had been so consumed by his new, terrifying reality, the impending birth of his first child, that he had completely neglected the small, intimate rituals that had once defined their relationship. Instead of romantic evenings, he brought home the faint, lingering scent of another woman's perfume, telltale lipstick stains on his collar, and crumpled receipts from places she had never been. These were his new gifts to her, gifts she had never wanted, not even in her worst, most terrifying nightmares. But they were real, tangible evidence of his betrayal. A constant, agonizing reminder of the pain he had inflicted. "Okay," he said, a little surprised by her suggestion, but he quickly recovered his composure. "Are you done here? Go get dressed, and we'll go. I just need to finish cooking for Mom first," she said. Helen disliked eating out. She only went to restaurants on special occasions, when the entire family was together. Besides, a romantic dinner for two with your mother-in-law tagging along was not exactly an ideal scenario. Sarah stood in front of her closet, her fingers tracing the outlines of her dresses. She finally chose a simple, elegant lace dress that she had bought for their anniversary. It was a little snug now. She sighed. She had been comfort eating lately, a futile attempt to fill the gaping void in her heart with food. Michael stood in the doorway, watching her, a fresh wave of guilt washing over him. He had been so preoccupied with Jessica that he hadn't truly looked at his wife in a long time. He noticed now that she was thinner than before. The dress that had once been a perfect fit now hung loosely on her frame. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. This had always been her favorite way for him to hold her. "Let me just hold you for a minute," he whispered. She stood perfectly still, a statue in his embrace, not saying a word. His touch was comforting, but it couldn't fill the cold, cavernous emptiness inside her. "You're the most beautiful woman in the world," he said. "There are plenty of women out there who are prettier than me, more talented than me." She replied, her voice barely a whisper, "But to me, there's no one but you." Tears welled up in her eyes, hot and stinging. She wanted to ask him, "If I'm the only one for you, then why did you go to another woman? Was it because I couldn't give you a child?" But the words caught in her throat. A painful, unspoken lump. "We should go," she said, gently pulling away from his embrace. "Mom, we're going out for dinner," she called as they headed for the door. "I've cooked for you. It's on the stove." Helen, engrossed in her television show, just waved a dismissive, indifferent hand. Their relationship was already strained to the breaking point, and a recent conversation with Michael had made it even worse. If this had been a few months ago, she would have launched into a lengthy, blistering lecture about wasting money, being frivolous, and not saving for the future. But tonight, she said nothing. Sarah didn't bother trying to explain. She knew that with her mother-in-law, she was already judged and condemned. Any explanation would just be seen as talking back, the usual place. He asked as they got in the car. "Yes," she replied. She was glad he still remembered. She had been afraid that after all this time, he would have forgotten. Earlier that day, she had left work early and driven to his hospital from a safe distance. She had watched him leave, but he hadn't gone in the direction of their home. She had followed him, her heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm in her chest. Just another anonymous car in the bustling city traffic. She had followed him to a small, unfamiliar house in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. She had watched as a pregnant woman ran out to greet him, throwing her arms around him in a tight, possessive embrace. Then they had gone inside together, and the door had closed behind them, shutting her out. The truth, in all its ugly, heartbreaking detail, was laid bare before her. Tears streamed down her face, blurring her vision, turning the world into a watery, distorted mess. In the movies, when a wife catches her husband cheating, she storms, screaming and crying, attacking the other woman. Sarah had always thought that if it were her, she would do the same. She would fight. She would make a scene. She would vent her rage. But now, faced with the stark, brutal reality of it, she found that she was paralyzed, unable to do anything but watch, her heart breaking into a million irreparable pieces. At the restaurant, Michael carefully cut her steak into small, bite-sized pieces and shelled the shrimp for her, just like he always used to. Since they had arrived, she had been silent, a ghost at the table, mechanically eating her food. He could sense the strange, heavy atmosphere between them, a palpable tension that was suffocating. She wasn't her usual cheerful self, chattering away about her day. Suddenly, he found that he didn't know what to say. "Do you remember the promises we made to each other when we first got married?" she asked, her voice breaking the heavy silence. The soft, romantic melody from the piano filled the vast, empty space between them. "Yes, of course. I remember, he said, nodding. Why do you ask? She didn't answer his question. Instead, she asked another. We promised that no matter what happened, we would always be honest with each other. Right? Yes, he said, a cold, creeping feeling of dread snaking its way up his spine. She knew. She must have found out something about Jessica. Even a guilty person startles at the slightest sound, and he was no exception. Then tell me about the woman you were with this afternoon, she said, looking directly into his eyes. Her gaze was so intense, so penetrating, that it felt like it was peeling back the layers of his soul. The fork in his hand slipped from his grasp and clattered onto his plate. At that exact terrible moment, his phone, lying on the table, lit up with a text message from Jessica. I'm home. Are you coming over tonight? Say something, she urged, her voice trembling. On the verge of shattering, don't just sit there in silence. I'm listening. He hadn't expected her to find out this way, and he certainly hadn't expected her to be so unnervingly calm. Her composure, her quiet dignity, only made him feel more guilty, more despicable. I'm sorry, he said, the words barely a whisper. It was the first thing that came to his mind, the thing he had wanted to say to her for so long but had never had the courage to. No, faced with her discovery, it was all he could offer. A sad, withered smile touched her lips. It was a smile more painful to look at than a flood of tears. Don't be sorry, she said, shaking her head. Don't apologize. I just want to know about you and her. As if on cue, his phone rang again. It was Jessica. Seeing his panicked reaction, she knew who it was. You should answer that, she said, when he didn't move. She reached across the table and picked up the phone. If you want, then I will. Sarah! Don't! He started, but it was too late. She had already answered the call. Hello! Why aren't you answering my texts? Are you coming over to see me and the baby tonight? Jessica's cheerful, oblivious voice chirped through the phone. There was more. The baby, the one thing Sarah had desperately, atchingly wanted, the one thing she couldn't have, this other woman possessed. Was that it? Was he so tired of a childless marriage that he had sought comfort elsewhere? A single tear escaped and traced a salty path down her cheek. She could no longer pretend to be strong. Hello. Why aren't you saying anything? Her strength gave out. The phone slipped from her numb fingers and fell to the floor with a dull thud. People at nearby tables turned to look. She didn't care. The tears she had been holding back for so long now flowed freely. An unstoppable, heartbreaking torrent of grief and pain. She had tried so hard to be strong, to be composed, but now she was completely, utterly broken. If it had just been an affair, a moment of weakness, she might have found a way to forgive him. But a child changed everything. She couldn't think anymore. She stood up and ran out of the restaurant, fleeing the scene of her shattered life. Michael tried to follow her, but the waiter stopped him, his voice polite but firm. Excuse me, sir, you haven't paid your bill. By the time he had settled the bill and rushed outside, she was gone. He looked around frantically, his heart hammering against his ribs. The street was crowded, a chaotic sea of faces. Where could she have gone? He had been the one to stray, the one to make the mistake, and now he was lost. He felt a wave of panic, regret, and helplessness wash over him. Then he saw her, a small, lonely figure huddled at the base of a tree, her shoulders shaking with violent sobs. His heart ached with a pain so intense it took his breath away. He had been so consumed by his guilt and his responsibility to his unborn child with Jessica that he had completely, utterly neglected his wife. He had taken her for granted, and now he was paying the terrible price. He slowly walked over to her. The sounds of the city, the traffic, the people, all faded into a dull, distant roar. All he could see was her, crying, alone, her pain a tangible thing in the cool night air. You two have a child together?" she asked, her voice choked with tears. He didn't answer. He reached out to pull her into his arms, but she pushed him away with a surprising strength. "Say something. Why are you so quiet? Is there anything else I don't know? Please, just tell me everything now. Don't let me be the fool anymore. I'm sorry," he whispered, kneeling beside her on the cold pavement. "I'm so sorry. Sorry. Is that all you can say? I don't need your apologies. I just need the truth. How long have you been lying to me? You promised you would love me, take care of me, that we would face everything together. We were supposed to be trying for a baby together, but you couldn't wait. Could you? Why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you just let me go so you could be with her? Why did you have to sneak around, to lie to me, to make me look like this? Are you happy now?" The wind picked up, whipping her thin dress around her. Her coat and purse were still back at the restaurant. He reached for her hand. It was ice cold. She tried to pull it away, but he held on tight. "I know that nothing I say can change what I've done," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you have to believe me. I don't love her. You don't love her." She scoffed, her voice laced with a bitter, corrosive venom. "You don't love her, but you slept with her. You had a child with her. Don't make me laugh. It was a mistake," he pleaded, his voice desperate. "I was drunk. When I woke up, it had already happened. I can't just tell her to get rid of my child. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me," she cried, her voice rising in disbelief. "Which do you think is more painful? Finding out from you at the beginning, or finding out like this? I have the divorce papers ready. All you have to do is sign," he said, pulling her into a desperate, crushing embrace. "I'm not signing anything. I'm not letting you go. Then what do you want?" She sobbed, beating her fists weakly against his chest. "You want to be responsible for your child, but you won't let me go. You want me to live like this? Knowing my husband has a mistress and a child with her on the side. For how long?" She wanted to scream, to unleash the primal rage that was consuming her, but she was too exhausted from crying. Her voice was just a hoarse, ragged whisper. "You're selfish. You're a coward. You're a liar." "I know," he said, his own tears starting to fall, hot and shameful. "You can hit me. You can scream at me. You can do whatever you want. But please, just don't leave me. After the baby is born, we can bring him home. As my child too. I can't abandon him." On a quiet, forgotten street corner, a man knelt before a crying woman, his head bowed in shame. The city bustled around them, a world of its own, oblivious to the small, heartbreaking drama playing out in the shadows. In front of her shocked friend, Emily, Sarah took the divorce papers she had so carefully, so painfully prepared and tore them into tiny, confetti-like pieces. "What are you doing?" Emily gasped. "Are you really gonna forgive him?" "I don't have a choice," Sarah said with a sigh that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. "Are you crazy?" Emily exclaimed, her composure shattering. "Why are you torturing yourself like this? This isn't the Dark Ages. If you can't live with him, then leave him. Why do you have to put yourself through this? You need to think about yourself first. How long can you live with this pain? This constant, agonizing reminder of his betrayal. Everything Emily said was a perfect echo of Sarah's own thoughts. It was why she had prepared the papers in the first place. Making this decision had taken days of agonizing, soul-searching deliberation. "Thank you, Emily," she said softly. "I know you're just looking out for me." She paused, took a deep, shuddering breath, and then said, "Impregnant." It was an unbelievable, staggering twist of fate at the lowest, most desolate point in her life. When her marriage was teetering on the brink of collapse, she had been given the one thing she had always wanted, the one thing she had thought was forever out of her reach. She didn't know if this was a blessing that would heal their broken relationship, or another devastating complication that would only make things worse. "But you can still leave him," Emily insisted, her voice urgent. Plenty of women raise children on their own these days, and who knows? You might meet someone better. The last time she had thought she was pregnant, it had been a cruel, heartbreaking false alarm. This time, she hadn't paid much attention to the signs, afraid of another crushing disappointment. But it was real. In the midst of her heartbreak and despair, a tiny, resilient spark of joy had ignited. She wasn't alone anymore. She had her child. She shook her head, a gentle hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. "It's not the baby's fault. You know how long I've wanted this? Now that it's finally happened, I have to do everything I can to protect this child and a new man. There's no guarantee he would be any better than the one I have. I want my child to grow up with a mother and a father. If we can still talk to each other, if there's still a chance, then we have to try. This baby is a miracle, and I will do anything for my child." Seeing the unwavering determination in her friend's eyes, Emily stopped arguing. "Okay," she said, squeezing Sarah's hand in a gesture of support. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." The tension at the dinner table was so thick you could cut it with a knife. For the past few days, Michael had been coming home on time. A silent, brooding presence at the table, he ignored Jessica's constant, frantic calls and texts. Sarah, for her part, had been quiet, withdrawn, lost in the labyrinth of her own thoughts. Helen could sense the change in the atmosphere, the cold, unspoken war that had been declared. She knew something was deeply, terribly wrong between her son and his wife. "Did you two have a fight?" she finally asked, unable to bear the suffocating silence any longer. "Mom, we're fine," Sarah replied automatically, the words a hollow echo. Helen knew better. The change had started the night they had gone out for dinner. But if they didn't want to talk about it, she wasn't going to press them. She had never really liked Sarah, mainly because she couldn't give her a grandchild at her age. All her friends were doting on their grandchildren, and she was left with an empty house, a son married for years with no children, and the constant, biting whispers of the neighbors. She sighed and put down her chopsticks, her appetite gone. "Are you not hungry, Mom?" Sarah asked. "I can make you some soup." "It's fine. You two eat." Sarah had only told Emily about the pregnancy. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that Jessica would eventually find her way to their doorstep. She was just waiting for the right moment to tell everyone. If it weren't for this whole devastating mess, the family would be celebrating right now, overjoyed at the prospect of a new baby. She squeezed the sponge in her hand, scrubbing furiously at the last of the dishes. Tonight, she would talk to Michael. The silence was suffocating them. They had to talk, to communicate. If they were going to have any chance of fixing this, love might fade, but there was still a bond between them. a shared history. Michael was waiting for her in their room. "Sarah," he began. She didn't answer. She walked over to him and buried her face in his chest, her body trembling. For the past few days, she had been cold and distant, and he had been terrified that she would serve him with the divorce papers. He had planned to talk to her tonight, to plead with her one more time. He hadn't expected this. He was surprised, but he quickly wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight, as if afraid she might disappear. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice muffled against his shirt. "And I need you to be completely, brutally honest with me. I can't handle any more lies, any more surprises." "Okay," he said. "Anything." She pulled back and looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "Do you still love me?" If he hesitated, even for a fraction of a second, she knew she would walk away and never look back. "Yes," he said without a moment's hesitation, his voice firm and clear. "I have never stopped loving you. It was a gamble, a leap of faith into a terrifying abyss. But she had to take it. If he had chosen the other woman, then no amount of effort on her part would have mattered. But he hadn't. She chose to believe him, to trust him one more time. It was easy to run away, to give up. It was much, much harder to stay and fight, to rebuild what had been so thoroughly broken. But there was too much at stake to just let it all go. Michael had fallen asleep, his arm draped protectively around her. The relentless stress of the past few weeks had taken its toll. And now that there was a fragile glimmer of hope, he could finally rest. She watched him for a long time, her gaze tracing the lines of his tired face. He looked drawn, exhausted. He had stubble on his chin and dark circles under his eyes. He wasn't as handsome as he used to be. She gently took his hand and placed it on her belly. "Can you feel it?" She thought, "A new life is growing here." Our child. Lately, packages had been arriving for Sarah at her office. She hadn't ordered anything, and she didn't recognize the sender's name. At first, she thought it was a mistake, but the name and phone number on the label were undeniably correct. None of her colleagues had ordered anything either, so she went down to the security desk to retrieve it. It wasn't really a package, more like a large, ominous envelope. "What is it?" a coworker asked as she brought it back to her desk. "I have no idea," Sarah replied, tearing it open with a sense of dread. Inside was an ultrasound photo. She closed her eyes and took a deep, steadying breath, trying to stay calm. The name on the photo had been crudely blacked out, but she knew, with a sickening certainty, who it belonged to. If Jessica's goal was to provoke her, to push her over the edge, she had severely miscalculated. Sarah had already shed too many tears over this. Now, she had to fight for her child. She would not let this woman's petty, cruel games affect her or her baby. But still, a sharp, familiar pain pierced her heart. She suddenly remembered the pregnant woman she had bumped into at the mall with Emily. It had been Jessica. It had to be. She had deliberately bumped into her. The woman who was carrying her husband's child had been standing right in front of her, and she hadn't even known. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello," she answered, her voice wary. "You got my little gift," a woman's voice, sickly sweet, said. "Are you pleased?" Sarah looked at the number on the screen, then put the phone back to her ear. "I think you have the wrong number," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "Oh, don't hang up," the woman said with a musical, mocking laugh. "You really don't know who I am. Well, then let me introduce myself. I'm the woman who is carrying your husband Michael's child." The office was quiet. Sarah didn't want to give her coworkers any more gossip to chew on during their lunch break. She stood up and walked out of the room, her heart pounding a furious rhythm. "You know," Sarah said, her voice laced with a cold, cutting sarcasm. You sound like a mosquito, the female kind, the ones that suck blood so they can lay their eggs, spreading disease wherever they go. One swat, and they're gone. She paused for effect. Just kidding. I know you're pregnant. You don't seem to be getting the message, the woman on the other end said, her playful tone gone, replaced by a sharp, angry edge. Let me repeat it for you. I am pregnant with your husband's child. I heard you, Sarah replied calmly. Is that all you called to tell me? Jessica had called to gloat, to rub salt in the wound. She hadn't expected Sarah to be so composed, so unshaken. The anger she had been suppressing now boiled over. Are you really that stupid? Or are you just pretending? Let's see how long you can keep up this pathetic act. You couldn't even do the one thing a wife is supposed to do. Give your husband a child. So I did it for you. A useless woman like you should just pack her bags and get out. You crazy bitch. Sarah hissed, her own composure finally cracking. You're the one who needs to get out. She ended the call and clenched the phone in her hand, her knuckles turning white. She had chosen this path, and she knew it wouldn't be easy. This other woman, this 13 Zodiac, was no longer a distant, abstract threat. She had declared war, but Sarah would not be broken by words. If that were the case, she would have already lost. Before, she had nothing. But now, she had her child. She had the world. She walked back to her desk and retrieved the ultrasound photo from the trash can. She put it in her purse. She had a feeling she would need it. That afternoon, Helen was sweeping the front porch. The flowers were in full bloom, and they're faded. Spent petals littered the ground. It was a daily chore. But today there seemed to be more than usual. She was bent over, her back aching, when she heard the gate creak open. Assuming it was Sarah, she didn't bother to look up. Hello, a sweet, melodic voice said. Helen stopped sweeping and looked up. A young, heavily pregnant woman was standing in front of her. She didn't recognize her. And why hadn't she rung the bell or called out? It was rude to just walk in like that. She made a mental note to be more careful. What if it had been a thief? And you are? Helen asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Oh, and so sorry, the young woman said with a charming, disarming smile, holding out a fruit basket. This is for you. I should have come to visit sooner, but I was afraid. Helen was still confused. And what exactly are you afraid of? The young woman, Jessica, hesitated, biting her lip in a display of calculated vulnerability. The baby I'm carrying. It's Michael's. It's your grandchild. The broom fell from Helen's hand with a loud clatter. What did you just say? I'm pregnant with Michael's child. Jessica repeated, her voice soft but clear, each word a carefully placed stone in the foundation of her plan. Your grandchild. She looked down, feigning shyness. I wanted to come sooner, but my situation, it's not exactly ideal. It took me a long time to build up the courage. Please don't be angry with me. Helen's mind flashed back to her son's cryptic words. So this is what he had meant. He hadn't wanted to say it in front of Sarah. She was going to have a grandchild after all. Her heart, which had been a barren wasteland for so long, suddenly filled with a rush of overwhelming affection for the young woman standing before her. She must have had such a hard, lonely time, as long as she had her grandchild. That was all that mattered. The fact that this woman had come between her son and his wife was a minor, insignificant detail. Oh, you poor child, Helen said, her voice filled with a sudden, gushing sympathy. Come in. Come in. Jessica could hardly contain her glee. Overcoming the obstacle of her future mother-in-law had been shockingly, laughably easy. She had gambled on Helen's desperation for a grandchild, on the deep-seated resentment she held for Sarah's infertility. And she had been right. It had been an easy, decisive victory. She looked around at the spacious, well-appointed house. Do you see this? Little one, she thought, patting her belly with a proprietary air. This is our future home. She wasn't sure if the baby could see it, but she certainly could. She couldn't wait to get out of her cramped, rented apartment and move in here. In just a short time, Jessica had completely, utterly won Helen over. I should probably go now, she said, feigning concern. Your daughter-in-law will be home soon, and I don't want to cause any trouble. She had deliberately timed her visit for the late afternoon, and now she was putting on a show of being considerate. She stood up, holding her belly as if for support. Stay for dinner. Helen insisted. Don't worry about Sarah. I'm here. She won't dare say a word. This was exactly what Jessica had wanted to hear. She knew Helen would be her shield, her protector, but she had to play her part. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with a trembling, manufactured gratitude. You're so kind to me. I don't know how to thank you. I was so afraid. She lowered her head, hiding her triumphant, predatory smile. Nonsense, Helen said with a sigh. Just take care of yourself and give me a healthy, chubby grandchild. That's all the thanks I need. Now, you sit right here. I'm going to make you some chicken soup. You're staying for dinner. I'm sorry, Jessica said, her voice filled with a regret she didn't feel. I really can't tonight. I have another appointment, but it'll come back soon. I promise. Well, all right, Helen said, her disappointment palpable. But you have to come back soon. Where do you live? I should come and visit you. Michael knows where I live, Jessica said with a sweet, innocent smile. He's been there many times. Oh, right? Helen said, tapping her forehead. How did you get here? Do you want to wait for Michael to take you home? That's okay, she replied. My taxi is waiting at the end of the street. Be careful. Then, Helen said, and come back soon. I will. Goodbye. The broom still lay in the middle of the porch, the pile of leaves unswept, but Helen didn't notice. She was lost in a happy, blissful daze, as if she had just woken from a beautiful, long-awaited dream. Her grandchild. She was finally going to have a grandchild to hold, to cherish, just like everyone else. The taxi at the end of the street had been waiting for a while. Jessica had considered waiting for Sarah to come home, but had decided against it. Her mere presence in the house was enough to threaten Sarah's already precarious position. She saw herself as a cat, toying with a mouse, wearing it down until it was too exhausted to fight back. Killing it right away would be no fun. Poor, pathetic Sarah, she thought with a sneer. She thinks she's so high and mighty, but she doesn't know who she's dealing with. Michael had been visiting less and less frequently, and when he did come, he would just drop off some food and leave. He rarely stayed to talk, and he answered her texts with short, perfunctory replies. She knew he was trying to pull away, to distance himself. But she wasn't going to make it that easy for him. She had tried being sweet and seductive, but it hadn't worked. So she had gone straight to the source, to his mother. She had him now. There was no escape. Thank you, Sarah said to the man who had given her a ride home. Her scooter had broken down in the middle of the road, and he had kindly offered her a ride to the repair shop. It wouldn't be ready until the next day. Don't thank me, he said with a friendly smile. Just buy me a cup of coffee sometime. That's a steep price for a short ride. She joked, but you'll think about it. You go on now. I'm home. He waved and drove off. On the coffee table in the living room were 2 empty glasses. Did we have a visitor today, Mom? Sarah asked Helen. Helen just grunted in response. She was waiting for Michael to get home so she could discuss the divorce with him. Now that she had Jessica, there was no reason to keep this useless, barren daughter-in-law around any longer. And Jessica needed someone to take care of her. Sarah went upstairs and took the ultrasound photo out of her purse. She stared at it for a long time, then turned it over in her hands. Michael was standing behind her, but because her back was to him, he couldn't see what she was holding. She turned around and handed it to him. What's this? He asked. He took it, and the color drained from his face. Did she come here? Sarah shook her head. She sent it to my office. Before Michael could say another word, Helen burst into the room, her face a storm cloud of righteous indignation. What are you going to do about her? Are you just going to let her suffer alone? She turned to Sarah, her eyes blazing. You knew all along. Did you? Well, let me tell you something. In bringing her here to live with us, she's about to give birth to my grandchild, and I'm not going to let her do it alone. You have no say in the matter. They both knew that Jessica had already been to the house, and it was painfully, glaringly clear that she had already won Helen over. Mom, Sarah said, standing up, her voice trembling but firm. This isn't the old days, where a man could have multiple wives living under the same roof. I will not agree to this, and this is not a boarding house. I will not agree to her moving in. And with Sarah on this, Michael said, I will provide for her and the baby, but she is not moving in here. Hearing her son side with his wife sent Helen into a volcanic rage. How dare you? That child is your flesh and blood. My grandchild. You can't just leave her out there on her own. She rounded on Sarah again, her voice a venomous hiss. And you? How long have you been married to my son? Have you given him any children? You have no right to speak. Whether she moves in or not is not your decision to make. You should be grateful I haven't thrown you out of this house already. Mom, how can you talk to her like that? Michael interjected, his voice sharp with anger. She is my wife. We were married in front of our family and friends. It's legal. She has every right to be here. Why are you being so cruel to her? Oh, so in the cruel one now. Helen cried, sinking to the floor and beating her chest dramatically. My poor husband. If you could only see this. Our son, the son we raised, has turned against his own mother, is so bewitched by this woman. This useless, barren woman, that his refusing to let me take care of my own grandchild. How will I ever face you in the afterlife? It was a scene straight out of a melodramatic soap opera. Helen was throwing a tantrum like a spoiled child who hadn't gotten in their way. Michael sighed and bent down to help her up. Mom, I have something to tell you, Sarah said, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. What now? Helen snapped, her eyes still blazing. Are you going to blame my son for having an affair? You should blame yourself first. You couldn't give him a child, so what did you expect? And now you're trying to stop me from taking care of my own grandchild. If you're so capable, then why don't you get pregnant? Without another word, Sarah went to the dresser and took out her own medical report. She handed it to Helen. I'm pregnant. Michael took the report from his mother's hand. a slow, incredulous smile spreading across his face. This time, there was no confusion, no fear. The situation with Jessica was still a tangled, chaotic mess. But this was different. This was the child he and his wife had longed for. A sacred bond that would hold their fractured marriage together. A reason for Sarah not to leave him. He knew he was being selfish. He couldn't let go of Jessica's child, but he couldn't lose Sarah and their baby either. He thought he could have it all. He didn't realize that their child could be the very thing that pushed Sarah to finally let him go. It all depended on his mother and on him. Helen snatched the report back Michael and threw it in Sarah's face. The papers fluttered to the floor like wounded birds. Michael and Sarah were both stunned into silence. He quickly pulled Sarah behind him, shielding her from his mother's irrational wrath. "Don't you touch her," he yelled, his voice a roar. Helen, no longer pretending to be frail and weak, stood up, her eyes blazing with a furious, unholy light. Pregnant. Now, at a time like this, who's the father? You've been sleeping with someone else, haven't you? You found out about Jessica, and now you're trying to trick us to save your own skin. You look so innocent, so pure, but you've been cheating on my son behind his back. Sarah had thought this would be happy news, something that would bring their shattered family back together. She had never, in her wildest nightmares, imagined her mother-in-law could be so cruel, so twisted. The vile accusation hung in the air, a poisonous, suffocating cloud. "Mom?" Michael shouted, his voice filled with a pained disbelief. "How can you say that when another woman gets pregnant, you treat her like a queen, but when your own daughter-in-law, my wife, gets pregnant, you accuse her of cheating? If anyone should be suspicious, it's me, not you." The argument between the two most important women in his life was tearing him apart. And now, with the third woman thrown into the mix, it was a tangled, chaotic, unbearable mess. And it was all his fault. That's it. I'm just going to end it all. Helen shrieked, running towards the wall as if to bash her head against it. It was a classic, manipulative move, one she had seen in countless movies. Michael caught her just in time. "Let go of me. You don't listen to me anyway. Let her walk all over you." "I'm sorry, Mom," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "You can bring her here if you want. Just please, don't do this." She had just found out she was pregnant, and the fragile joy she had felt had been snatched away from her, replaced by this ugly, chaotic, heartbreaking scene. Michael closed his eyes and sighed, a sound of utter defeat. He had no other choice. For now, he had to give in to his mother's insane demands. "You heard her, Mom. That's my promise." Hearing this, Helen stopped struggling. She shot Sarah a triumphant, venomous look, then stormed out of the room. Slamming the door behind her with a force that shook the walls, Michael pulled Sarah into his arms, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You'll find a way to fix this." "I know," she said. This had all gone beyond her wildest, most terrifying expectations. Her mother-in-law had used her own life as a weapon to get what she wanted. Michael had no choice but to give in. In the living room, Helen was on the phone with Jessica, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Hello, Jessica. It's me. Thanks for the heads up. You were right." She sighed dramatically. "I've known her for years, but I never thought she could be so deceitful." On the other end of the line, Jessica lay on her bed, langily eating a bowl of grapes. "Don't be too hard on her," she said, her voice dripping with a false, cloying sympathy. "She's probably just desperate to keep Michael. And so sorry. I should have just kept quiet about my pregnancy, raised the baby on my own. I never meant to cause all this trouble. If only Michael had met you first," Helen said with a sigh. "She just said she was pregnant. Can you believe it? But don't you worry. You're the one I'm concerned about. You pack your things and move in here with me. You hear? I want to take care of you." The grape in Jessica's hand burst as she squeezed it. This was better than she could have ever hoped for. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "I don't want to be a bother." "Nonsense. The only bother is having her here. Now, don't you argue with me. Michael has already agreed. It's not safe for you to be on your own." "Well, in that case, thank you. I'll pack my things." "Good. I'll be waiting." During a routine prenatal checkup, Jessica had called Michael to take her, but he had said he was busy and told her to go by herself. She had whined and complained, but he had been firm. After her appointment, she was about to leave when she saw Sarah walking down the hallway with another woman. It was the maternity ward. Jessica didn't think Sarah was actually pregnant. She probably had a friend who was. But some dark intuition, made her turn back and follow them. She didn't know that Sarah had already seen her ultrasound photo, but she had seen Sarah's picture on Michael's social media many times. She recognized her immediately. She listened to their conversation, catching bits and pieces, just enough to understand that Sarah was indeed pregnant. But she also heard Sarah's fear that Michael wouldn't accept the baby. With a legal wife and a child on the way, Jessica knew she was at a serious disadvantage. She called Helen and planted the poisonous seed of doubt in her mind. And as fate would have it, the day she called was the same day Sarah's scooter had broken down and a male friend had given her a ride home. Helen had seen them, and it had confirmed all of Jessica's venomous lies. When Sarah got home from work, Jessica was already there, lounging on the sofa with her feet propped up on the coffee table, watching TV as if she owned the place. Helen was in the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune. In all the years Sarah had been married to Michael, she could count on one hand the number of times her mother-in-law had cooked for her. But for this new arrival, this usurper, she was pulling out all the stops. Well, with a belly that big, I guess she has earned the royal treatment, Sarah thought wryly. My baby is a grandchild too, but it's already being treated like an outsider. Hello, darling. You're home. Jessica purred, not bothering to get up. Who is it? Helen called from the kitchen. It's just Sarah, Mom. Jessica replied. The casual, familiar mom grated on Sarah's nerves like nails on a chalkboard. She was the daughter-in-law, but she was being treated like a stranger, an intruder in her own home. She ignored them both. She had already agreed to this, in a way, and whether she agreed or not didn't matter. Helen had made the decision for everyone, but Jessica wasn't going to let her off that easily. She accidentally kicked a glass off the coffee table. It shattered on the floor, sending shards of glass flying in every direction. The sound brought Helen running from the kitchen. What happened? I think Sarah startled me. Jessica stammered, her face a mask of fear. She came in so quietly. I didn't see her. I must have knocked it over. She wrote the script and played the part herself. Sarah thought, amazed at the woman's breathtaking audacity. You, what did you do to her? Helen shrieked at Sarah. Look! She's terrified. I'll clean this up. You stay away from her. She spoke to Sarah with venom in her voice. But when she turned to Jessica, her tone was all sweetness and light. Sarah knew that anything she said would be twisted against her, so she decided to play along. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice filled with a fake, exaggerated concern. "I'm so sorry. Are you hurt? Let me see." Jessica shook her head, playing the part of the frightened, vulnerable victim to perfection. "I'm fine." Helen had been about to launch into another blistering tirade, but Sarah's apology had taken the wind out of her sails. "Well," she huffed, "just be more careful next time. And if you have any funny ideas about hurting Jessica, you'll have to answer to me. Now, go upstairs, change your clothes, and come down and help me with dinner." Sarah didn't want to make a scene, so she said nothing more. This was just a warning shot, a small, bitter taste of what was to come. Now that Jessica was in the house, she knew there would be many more battles to fight. Helen had made a special herbal chicken soup, a fragrant, nourishing broth just for Jessica. There were other dishes too, all rich and hearty. When Michael got home, he was carrying a container of hot fish porridge, a specialty known to be good for pregnant women. He, like Sarah, was surprised to find a guest in the house. "Michael, you're home," Jessica cried, getting up to greet him as if she were his wife. "You're back. The baby and I have been waiting for you." She reached for the bag he was carrying, but he pulled it away. Her face fell for a fraction of a second, but she quickly recovered, linking her arm through his. "You took so long." "We're starving." She had seen the container of porridge and knew instantly what it was. Michael had bought it for her several times before. He gently removed her arm. "If you're hungry, you should have eaten. No one asked you to wait." "What kind of talk is that?" Helen scolded. "She waited for you because she cares about you. We're a family. We eat together." It had been a long time since Michael had seen his mother so happy. For Sarah's sake, he didn't argue. He knew that she was the one who had cooked dinner. Jessica, on the other hand, had done nothing but sit and watch TV. "Is Sarah home yet?" he asked. "Yes. She's upstairs," Helen replied, probably hiding in her room. No sense of responsibility at all. Just then, Sarah came down the stairs. She had just showered and was drying her hair. She was wearing loose, comfortable clothes. It was still early in her pregnancy, so her belly wasn't showing yet. "You're back," she said to Michael with a smile. She took the bag from him. "Porridge." "Thank you." Jessica, watching them, was not angry. In fact, she was pleased. "He's probably just afraid of upsetting me," she thought. "That's why he didn't give it to me himself." A smug, self-satisfied smile spread across her face. Michael, however, was not thinking about her at all. He was worried about Sarah. He didn't want her to be stressed, since Sarah had announced her pregnancy. Helen had completely ignored her, focusing all her maternal attention on Jessica. Michael was frustrated, but every time he tried to talk to his mother, she would just start rambling nonsense. So he had decided to take care of his wife himself. Dinner was served. Helen and Jessica were at the table, but Michael was still upstairs. Sarah was about to go and help, but Helen stopped her. "You're pregnant. You should sit down and rest. Don't do anything. But I feel bad just sitting here," Jessica said, though she had already taken a seat at the table. "Nonsense," Helen said. "We're family." She turned to Sarah and snapped, "Hurry up. Are you going to take all day?" She then went to the bottom of the stairs and called up to Michael, but his door was still closed. He was in the shower. She went back to the kitchen and whispered to Sarah, her voice a venomous hiss, "Those other dishes, I made them for Jessica. You know your place." Stick to the plain rice. Don't you dare touch her food. Sarah took a deep, steadying breath, trying to control the white-hot anger that was rising in her. Her mother-in-law was being unbelievably, monstrously cruel. She was a member of this family, not some stray dog they had taken in. But she held her tongue. Jessica, who had overheard everything, was ecstatic, but she pretended she hadn't heard. So what if you're the legal wife? She thought, the mother-in-law doesn't like you. You're such a good cook. Sarah, she said sweetly, you know how to do everything. I'm so clumsy in the kitchen. The compliment made Sarah's skin crawl. She knew Jessica was just trying to stir up more trouble. And she was right. What's so great about her? Helen immediately retorted. She just likes to show off. She was about to say more, but then Michael came downstairs. I bought you some porridge, he said to Sarah, taking the container out of the bag. You should eat it while it's hot. That smells delicious, Jessica said, looking over. You only bought one. Give that to Jessica, Helen immediately commanded. In her twisted mind, Jessica's baby was the legitimate heir, while Sarah's was a product of an affair. I bought this for my wife, Mom, not for anyone else, Michael said, his patience wearing dangerously thin. She's pregnant too. Helen argued, the baby needs nourishment. What's good for one is good for the other. First, she had forbidden Sarah from eating Jessica's food. And now she was trying to take the food Michael had bought for his own wife and give it to the other woman. Sarah was not a charity case. She had her own money. She could buy her own food. But the raw, blatant injustice of it all made her blood boil. She had been patient for far too long. If she didn't stand up for herself now, they would walk all over her. She took off her apron and smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's okay, Honey. Let Jessica have it. Jessica was about to reach for it, a triumphant smirk on her face. She thought she had won. But then Sarah continued, We'll just go out to eat. The smirk vanished from Jessica's face as if it had been wiped clean. When I was setting the table, Mom, you told me that you had only cooked for Jessica. And now, the porridge my husband bought for me, you want to give to her as well. My husband and I are hungry, but more importantly, our baby can't go hungry, so we'll go out. Unless you're home, I would have gone by myself. Jessica, is there anything else you want? I can pick it up for you on my way back. You're going out to eat now. Helen stammered, furious at being so openly defied. If you want to go, then go by yourself. I'm just doing what you want, Mom, Sarah said calmly. You didn't cook for me, so I have to go out and buy my own food. I'm not going to starve myself. She looked at Michael, waiting to see what he would do. This was a test. Would he stand by her, or would he cave to his mother's pressure? She didn't want to put him in this impossible position, but Helen had pushed her too far. Let's go, he said, taking her hand. Get your coat, you ungrateful wretch. Helen shrieked, throwing a bowl on the floor with a crash. Go on, get out, and don't come back. I am a human being, Mom, not an animal that you can just throw scraps to, Sarah said, her voice shaking with a righteous, long-suppressed emotion. We're leaving now. Michael led her upstairs. Jessica started to follow, but Helen stopped her. Let them go. Who needs them? I have you and my grandchild. That's all that matters. Furious, she started piling food onto Jessica's plate. Jessica ate, but the food, which had looked so delicious just a few minutes ago, now tasted like ash in her mouth. She had to force down each and every bite. And the chicken soup. It was so salty she almost spit it out. How could Helen have made such a mistake? She must have been so angry she had dumped the whole salt shaker in the car. Michael pulled over and turned to Sarah. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice filled with a deep, profound remorse. He knew he had failed to protect her from his mother's monstrous cruelty. He had thought that bringing Jessica into their home would be difficult, but he had never imagined it would be this bad. "It's not your fault," she said, though they both knew it was. He was the one who had created this catastrophic mess, but for now, she was willing to let it go. They drove in silence for a while. Then he pulled into the parking lot of their favorite restaurant. As they were getting out of the car, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. For some reason, a strange, cold feeling washed over her. The night air was cool, but she felt a sudden, inexplicable chill. She hesitated for a moment, then answered the call. "Hello." A deep, familiar voice on the other end said, "Do you remember me?" "I'm back." The guest room had been prepared for Jessica. Helen had even offered to let her share her own room, but Jessica had politely, strategically declined. She wanted her own space. After wishing her good night, Helen went downstairs to watch TV. The moment the door clicked shut, Jessica tiptoed out of her room and down the hall to Michael and Sarah's bedroom. She tried the doorknob, but it was locked. Sarah had insisted on it. Jessica cursed under her breath and went back to her room. Just then, she heard the sound of a car in the driveway. They were back. She quickly got into bed and pretended to be asleep. When they came in, Helen immediately started in on Sarah. "The kitchen is a mess. You haven't washed the dishes." She had deliberately told Jessica to leave them for Sarah. The porridge Michael had bought had been thrown on the floor and was starting to smell. "I'm a little tired," Sarah said. "I'm going to go to bed." She didn't have the energy to argue, to fight another pointless battle. "You're tired?" Helen sneered. "What about me? I'm old, and Jessica is pregnant. If you don't do it, who will?" This was her house, and she was the matriarch. She was used to being obeyed without question. Michael stepped in. "Jessica is pregnant, but so is Sarah." "Dill?" He started to head for the kitchen, but Sarah stopped him. She was not feeling well. She just wanted to lie down. She went upstairs, ignoring Helen's angry shouts that followed her up the stairs. "A man's place is not in the kitchen. Let her do it." "What? Is she the queen now?" "In my day, I had to work in the fields right up until the day I gave birth. Your father never lifted a finger to help me." Michael ignored her and went to the kitchen. Jessica came and stood in the doorway, watching him. "Can I help?" she asked sweetly. "I've got it," he said without looking at her. "You should go to bed." Helen came and stood next to her, watching her son clean the kitchen. She saw Jessica standing there, looking concerned and maternal, and a strange, insidious thought entered her head. They looked so right together, like a real couple. She went back to the living room and sat down, a new, terrible plan forming in her mind. Upstairs, Sarah couldn't sleep. The phone call from earlier kept replaying in her mind, a haunting echo. It had been years, but she had recognized his voice instantly. David, her ex-boyfriend. The last time she had seen him, she couldn't even remember when it was. It was the day of the big fight. The day they had broken up. The memory was a scar, faded but still there. He had left, and she had moved on. And now, he was back. She turned and snuggled closer to Michael, wrapping her arms around him. He was the man she loved now. David was a part of her past. A distant, faded memory. Michael woke up. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "Can you rub my back?" He smiled and began to gently massage her back until she drifted off to sleep, watching her sleep. A wave of fierce protectiveness washed over him. With Jessica in the house, he knew things were only going to get more complicated, more volatile. He had to find a way to fix this, to protect his wife and their unborn child. The next morning, Sarah woke up early. As usual, she cooked breakfast, deliberately adding more chili than usual. She and Michael were used to it. But Jessica, who had just moved in, was not. She took one bite and her face turned a bright, painful red. She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge and chugged it down. "Mom," she whined to Helen after Michael and Sarah had left for work, "the food is too spicy. The baby and I can't eat it." "That girl." Helen grumbled. "Don't you worry. I'll talk to her. From now on, I'll cook for you. What do you want for breakfast? I'll go buy it." "It's okay," Jessica said. "Just tell me where to go, and I'll get it myself. You're new here. You don't know where to go. You just sit right there." As soon as Helen was out the door, Jessica slipped upstairs. Michael had left the bedroom door unlocked. Sarah had forgotten her phone on the nightstand. With no one else in the house, Jessica walked boldly into their room. She saw their wedding photo on the wall, and a wicked, venomous smile spread across her face. She picked up a tube of lipstick and drew a crude, childish mustache and horns on Sarah's face. She then went to the closet and started rummaging through Sarah's things. On the bed was Sarah's phone, a black phone with a cute strawberry case. She remembered that Michael's phone was different. This must be Sarah's. She was about to pick it up when a hand shot out and grabbed it first. "What are you doing?" The voice behind her made her jump. It was Sarah. She had gotten to work and realized she had forgotten her phone. She had a feeling that something was wrong, a cold premonition that Jessica might try something. So she had turned around and come back, and her instincts had been right. The little witch was already snooping. "You scared me," Jessica said, trying to sound innocent. "Why are you sneaking around like that? This is my room. I can come and go as I please." "But you are not welcome in here." Jessica dropped the act. "So what? You're going to kick me out?" "Go ahead. I'd like to see you try." Sarah ignored her and went to get her phone. She knew better than to get into a physical altercation with a pregnant woman, especially one as manipulative and conniving as Jessica. There was no one else in the house to witness what happened. She just wanted to get her phone and leave. But as she turned to go, Jessica let out a piercing, blood-curdling scream and threw herself down the stairs. "What's going on?" "Jessica. Honey, are you okay?" Helen had just gotten back from the store. She heard the scream and came running. The sound was coming from Michael's room. Her first thought was that Sarah had done something to Jessica, to her precious grandchild. She burst into the room and saw Jessica on the floor, clutching her stomach and moaning in pain. "What happened? What did she do to you?" Helen demanded, rushing to Jessica's side. It wasn't her fault. "Mom?" Jessica sobbed, making it sound like she was covering for Sarah. "I was just careless. I didn't touch her." Sarah protested. She did it to herself, but she knew Helen wouldn't believe her by not denying it, by feigning forgiveness. Jessica had sealed her fate. Helen stood up and slapped Sarah across the face. The force of the blow sent her stumbling backward onto the bed. "You venomous snake. What did my grandchild ever do to you? I haven't even kicked you out of this house yet, and you're already trying to harm my family. Pack your things and get out. If anything happens to my grandchild, I will make you pay." Sarah's cheeks stung. Her ears were ringing. Her vision was blurry. She was the one who had been attacked, but she was being blamed. As she looked down, she saw a trickle of blood run down her leg. At the hospital, the doctor told her that she had had a close call, but the baby was going to be okay. She thanked God that her child was safe. You have to be strong. Little one, she whispered, her hand on her belly. Mommy is so sorry for putting you through that. I will protect you. Michael arrived. His face itched with worry and a cold. Simmering anger, he had been talking to his mother outside. She had filled his head with her poisonous, one-sided. He didn't know what to believe. Jessica and her baby were fine, but Sarah had had a terrifying scare. He walked into the room and sat down beside her. "Don't do that again," he said, his voice quiet but firm, each word a stone. "Whatever issues you have with me, don't take them out on her. That baby is my child too." It's innocent. Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. What? What did you just say?" "In not blaming you," he said. "But I don't want you to do anything to hurt my child. If you're angry, be angry with me." She pulled her hand away from his as if she had been burned. A bitter, painful, mirthless laugh escaped her lips. He had promised to protect her, to stand by her, but at the first sign of trouble, he had taken his mother's side. He had judged and condemned her without even listening to her side of the story. The last fragile shred of hope she had been clinging to dissolved into dust. "Get out," she said, her voice dangerously, terrifyingly calm. "Sarah, please," he said, trying to take her hand again. "Let's just calm down and talk about this." I said, "Get out." She screamed, her voice raw with a pain so profound it was almost primal. "Don't make me count to 3. He left, and she was alone with her tears. She knew that crying was not good for the baby, but she couldn't stop. She had never felt so alone, so utterly, completely betrayed. Her own husband, the man who was supposed to love and protect her, had turned against her. The door opened again. She thought it was Michael coming back. "I told you to get out," she said without looking up, but it wasn't Michael. It was David. He stood in the doorway, his face filled with a deep, palpable concern. It had been so long since she had seen him. He looked different, more mature, more settled. He had called her earlier, and now he was here. She quickly turned her head away, trying to hide her tear-stained, swollen face. "What are you doing here?" she asked. He didn't answer. He just stood there, looking at her with a mixture of pity and a deep, lingering sadness. She was no longer the carefree, vibrant girl he had once loved. She was a married woman, a mother-to-be, and she was in pain. When Michael returned to the room, it was empty. The bed was neatly made. He had been wrong. He knew he had been wrong. He had let his mother's words cloud his judgment, poison his mind. He had hurt Sarah deeply, unforgivably, and now he had to find her and make it right. He tried calling her, but she didn't answer. He called Emily, who, after a long and blistering lecture, finally told him where Sarah was. She had moved to another hospital, one where he didn't work. He was about to leave when his mother stopped him, a container of food in her hand. "Where are you going?" "Jessica's hungry. I just bought this for her. If you don't take it to her, she'll starve." She didn't mention Sarah at all. He took the food and went to Jessica's room. "Oh, Michael, you're here," she cried, her face lighting up. "I was so worried. Is Sarah okay?" "She's fine," he said curtly. He gave her the food and turned to leave. He had to find Sarah. He found her in a quiet, private room in the new hospital. David was there with her. He had brought her food, drinks, everything she could possibly need. He had taken care of everything. And Michael, her own husband, had been nowhere to be found. "What are you doing here?" Sarah asked when she saw him, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I came to see you," he said, his voice filled with a desperate remorse. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. It's a little late for that, don't you think?" she said, her voice cold and distant. David stood up. "I'll leave you two to talk," he said. He gave Michael a long, hard look before he left, a look that spoke volumes. Michael sat down in the chair David had just vacated. "Sarah, please, talk to me." But she wouldn't look at him. She just stared out the window, her face a mask of stone. He didn't know what to say, what to do. He had broken her trust, shattered it into a million pieces. And he didn't know if he could ever earn it back. The next day, Helen showed up at the hospital. She saw David fussing over Sarah, and her twisted imagination ran wild. "This is your lover, is it?" she shrieked, storming into the room. "You shameless hussy. You're not even divorced yet, and you're already flaunting your affair in public." Emily, who had just arrived, saw what was happening and immediately jumped to Sarah's defense. "You have no right to talk to her like that. You should take a long, hard look at your own son before you start accusing other people. As the one who had an affair and got another woman pregnant. And you brought that woman into your home and treated her like a queen while you tormented your own daughter-in-law. You're the shameless one." The two women went at it, their voices rising in a shouting match that attracted the attention of the nurses. Helen was eventually escorted out by security. Michael finally managed to get the truth out of a nurse who had witnessed the whole thing. Jessica had faked the fall. Sarah was innocent. He felt like the biggest, most pathetic fool in the world. He had been so blind, so easily manipulated by his mother and Jessica. He went to Sarah's room, but she was gone. David had checked her out and taken her to her old apartment, the one she had lived in before they were married. He went there and begged her to forgive him, to come home. He told her that he had been a fool, that he loved her, that he would do anything to make it right. And then David showed up with a DNA test. The baby Jessica had given birth to was not Michael's. It was David's. The whole thing had been a scheme, a cruel, elaborate, twisted plan to break up their marriage. Jessica had been David's accomplice all along. The truth came out, and the house of lies they had built came crashing down. Helen was devastated. She had been so cruel to Sarah, had driven away her own son, all for a grandchild that wasn't even hers. She went to Sarah and begged for her forgiveness. It took time, a lot of time. But eventually, Sarah did forgive them. She was still hurt, deeply scared, but she knew that for the sake of their child, they had to find a way to move forward. 3 months later, Helen was in the kitchen, cooking a feast. It was the day Michael was bringing Sarah home. The house had been scrubbed clean from top to bottom. As Sarah walked through the door, she smiled. "We're home," she whispered to the baby in her womb. "Daddy and Grandma are waiting for us." Early the next morning, Sarah woke up. She had been having trouble sleeping lately. She got out of bed and went to the window. Michael stirred and sat up, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "It's so," he mumbled, resting his head on her shoulder. "Come back to bed. You go back to sleep," she said, smiling. "I'm just going to go downstairs for a bit." In the kitchen, Helen was already up, cooking breakfast. "You're awake," she said, smiling at Sarah. "You should have slept in. Breakfast is almost ready. You don't have to help. You just sit down and relax." After breakfast, Michael went to work. Helen brought out the baby clothes she had been buying and started to wash them by hand. The sun was shining. A gentle breeze was blowing. and the tiny clothes danced on the clothesline. A colorful, hopeful welcome for the new life that was about to join their family